Call the Planning Commission meeting to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Chairman Dibble,
Here.
Vice Chairman Schrader,
Present.
Commissioner Zarguni,
Present.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner York,
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Here.
Commissioner Mandel,
Here.
Commissioner Salazar Garza,
Here.
and Commissioner Munoz will be absent. Quorum established.
Thank you. I would like to open up the public comment section of the meeting. There will be an opportunity for you to have comment on specific agenda items, but at this time we can open up public comment if you've got a comment on anything before the Planning Commission. All right, there being no one to comment, we'll close the public comment section. Move on to approval of absences. In the prior meeting, there was none, so we can move on to the approval of minutes from the April 20th meeting.
I move we approve the minutes.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving on to the consent public hearing items. Andrew, you want to go over those for us?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Andrew Demas with Development Services, reading in tonight's consent agenda, beginning with item number 2, Padre Island, Corpus Christi, Section A, Block 45, Tracks A-1A and A-1B, a final replat of 7.63 acres. Item number 3, Flower Bluff Estates, Block H, Lot 29A and 29B, a replat of .325 acres. Staff recommends approval along with a technical review committee. The submitted plats meet the Texas Local Government Code as well as the UDC. Under time extensions, item number 4, we have a first request for Water's Edge at Kitty Hawk Unit 3, a final of 13.65 acres. Staff recommends approval. Under letter B, new zoning, item number 5, case 0422-03, Manuel Gonzalez et al., which is a request at the intersection of Greenwood Drive and Galahar Drive. The request is from the RS6 Single Family 6 District to the RM1 Multifamily District. Staff recommends approval. And that concludes tonight's consent agenda. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Anyone have questions for staff? All right, there being none, I guess we'll take a motion to approve consent items under A and B.
I'll make a motion that we approve items 2 through 5 under the consent agenda.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I just want to note for the record, before we go into item number 6, Commissioner Zarguni will be abstaining from this item. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Item number 6 is Westwood Heights Unit 4, a final of 9.06 acres. This is the 5th request for a time extension of 6 months.
Commissioner York?
Can you give us a little background? I don't remember this one. And what was the original reason, and then what's the reason for this extension request?
The reasons have pretty much stayed the same. Of course, it began with the pandemic and the delays of finding labor in order to complete public improvements that has now moved on to cost of materials and the as well as supply chain issues that have been brought up. Now, the applicant has just this past week initiated a potential reimbursement agreement process. So that is another quote-unquote reason as to needing additional time to go through that process. I believe the applicant said he was going to be present to kind of give additional information. I don't see him in the audience, but nevertheless, that is the information that's been conveyed to us as staff of the rationale behind requesting an additional 6-month extension.
Okay, thank you. And then I don't know if you're able to answer this, but you mentioned they're applying for a reimbursement request. Do you know if they are, if that's something that's actually applies to them, or is it?
Well, as far as that, they have the ability to submit an application and go through that process, but it is, at the end of the day, reimbursements.
I know council has to vote on it, but I mean,
Yes.
do they qualify, or do we know, is it,
They are submitting an application, so we would have to do a completeness check and ensure all the data is there, and then, of course, it goes through that process all the way through city council. So it's a little premature to say it's
Do we-
either 100% eligible or not until we
right, what is
complete
the
that.
reimbursement request for? Is it water line, sewer line?
I believe it's water lines off the top of my head.
And is this like a grid main, or like oversized, or they're just trying to get reimbursed for a regular sized water line?
That is an excellent question. Let's see what we have.
And I'm sorry to grill you with all these specifics.
No,
I'm
no
just
worries.
Kind of trying to get at, are they just stalling, or is this a legitimate reimbursement request?
That's a fair question. Absolutely. This is the exact letter submitted to us, that there has been a substantial inflation in the price of construction development and the backlog of engineering construction availability, is what the latest letter states. It was only, again, last week that the application for reimbursement came through, and we're late, it was probably late Friday. So it's, I don't want to say it's complete or incomplete yet, since we're still going through that process, but I can tell you just by the sheer volume of requests, obviously there's some form of delay, whether, as you mentioned, it's a tactic versus a legitimate request. That's why we're hesitant to give a staff recommendation. Usually when you get to about 3 requests, there's a degree of reasonableness, but as soon as you get past that mark, it gets a little questionable. That's one of the motivating factors of why we moved expirations and extensions to a year. So you're not having to come before this body every 6 months, because sometimes it takes half that time just to get an engineer on board and have plans drawn to just begin the construction process. So that's a problem that will slowly remedy itself with the text amendment. But that is, what you see on the screen is exactly what's been conveyed to us as staff.
Okay, I got 2 more and then I'll leave you alone. Other than
worries.
the request for extension and the reimbursement application, has there been any other activity?
No.
Okay. And then lastly, if we don't grant the time extension, can you just remind us what exactly they just have to resubmit, start over in the
Correct.
plating process?
So if the plot expires, meaning they cannot demonstrate that some form of substantial progress has been made on public improvements, then the plot would expire and they would have to resubmit and begin the process again. Fortunately, in the few times that has happened, the benefit is that because they've already gone through the TRC process, it's usually not so much that they're going to get hit with 50 more comments that they have to correct. It's actually one of the easier reviews, but it is, we do double check to make sure nothing has changed between submittals.
Okay. And if that does happen, they have to resubmit, does that change, do they lose their vesting status? In other words, whatever codes have been updated since
Correct.
2.5 years ago?
That is correct. Once you
Okay.
expire, that is the get out of jail free card, it goes along with it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Yes, I do. Is there a limit on how many extensions can be provided?
Theoretically, no. The danger with extension, it's the exact same kind of speech we gave when we were working on the time extension text amendment was, why set the bar at a year? Why not 18 months? Why not 2 years? Why not 5 years? The reason is very much the reason Commissioner York brought up. If you have a change of code or a change of rules, the longer that you extend a plat is the longer it stays vested. So you have to find a happy median between how far you extend something to where you're not going to have to review it under an older version of the code. So you may have technically a new development following very old rules.
So even if we were to go ahead and extend it again this time, I know that it'd only be for 6 months.
Correct.
So when does the 1 year come into play?
Oh, I'm sorry, it would be 12 months. It is under the new rule now of an extension.
So now they'll have 12 months instead of the 6. So because here it's been, what, like almost 3 years?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And have we adopted a new code since, I guess? –
Any, I would say, major text amendments to the UDC, no. But that is not to say that, we're in the process of evaluating the UDC and going through that consultant process for amendments. So extending another year could, don't know for sure if we're going to be at that mark to adopt less than a year from now, but it is a real potentiality that this could vest it under an old UDC statute or UDC version. Correct.
All of these things.
There have been construction standards that changed too, so the city released their infrastructure design manual. I think it was effective March 1st.
Yes.
So I know some things changed.
Right, but the impact fees will not come for consideration until, say, I don't know, spring or summer of next year. And the UDC changes that Andrew was mentioning, as you guys know, it requires a robust public engagement. And believe me, that's not going to happen within 12 months of this date. So we should be safe, but never say never.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes, sir. I don't know if you may have said it, but did staff make a recommendation on this, whether to approve it or deny it?
When it gets to this many time extensions, usually above 3, we tend to shy away from making a recommendation. And it's not that we don't want to make a recommendation, but it does get to a point that it's self-defeating for us to say, sure, keep extending, because the goal of anyone platting is to get public improvements underway. We want to make sure folks stay compliant. We don't want to have any subdivision stragglers out there. So that is why we take more of the cautious approach and allow the commission to ask questions and deliberate on whether or not to grant an extension.
All right, no more questions for staff? Thank you. Is the applicant here? If you'd like to speak, you can come up. Please give us your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name's Naveed Zarguni, and this is for Westwood Heights, Unit 4. We've asked for a couple of extensions, but the last two, they were just kind of because of the whole deal with the, getting contractors and it's just a new world right now. So a lot of these contractors, they're busy, and our development is a very small project, so we keep getting pushed back to the back burner. And so we're just asking for one last extension so we can get past this reimbursement and get all our ducks in a row, and then we can start with construction. We've luckily been able to, get a contractor that's willing to work with us and start the project, but they're so busy that, they take on a project, they don't want to stop until they're completed. And as you know, development takes 4 to 6 months sometimes for a project to happen. But if you guys could take a look at it and give us an extension, I would appreciate it. The one thing is that we spend a lot of money. Well, I spend a lot of money paying the engineer and all this stuff, and I hate for it to just disappear. And hopefully, with the staff and the board, we can come to a conclusion.
How far along are you in the process? Have you got the engineering work done? Got
Oh, yeah.
plans? I mean, where?
Everything is completed. Engineering is ready. We have a full set of construction sets. We just wanted to, because what I was told was you need to make sure you don't start construction until you have the reimbursement set up. And that took a while because there was a couple of different personnels that were handling that. And now I've been in contact with Miss Catherine over there at the Development Services. So we've submitted the stuff. She got back with me the other day, and she was needing some more stuff. So Mr. Brett and Mr. Nixon are going to get together to give them that information. So once we get that, done and get the city council approved, hopefully we can break ground within 30 to 60 days after that. That's our...
All right, so you've already got your contract price with your contractor.
Yes.
You've got your financing lined up and everything. You're just waiting on.
Just kind of see how it goes with the reimbursement, see if they approve it, because that's a big ticket too. That's a big item number. So we want to make sure the finances and all that cooperate or collaborate together and then kind of break ground.
And the reimbursements are for,
I believe for the sanitary and water for the extension. The one thing with the contractors, well, they fell behind too, so all their projects have been lingering. And so this one gentleman we've been working with, his name is Max. I'm sure the city's worked with him, and he's a pretty reputable contractor, and he's a little pricey, but we're willing to work with him and get it started. But I just told him wait till, I don't want to start and then the reimbursement is an issue and then, having to stop the project and then cause more delays. Right now, it's just a matter of just paperwork and extensions.
Commissioner York?
I know you submitted for the reimbursement. Would you say that, does the project hinge on, I mean, if you don't get the reimbursement, are you still moving forward? You're just, I know there's a condition on the reimbursement that you can't start construction until,
Right.
or you won't get reimbursed, so is,
Well, if we can't get the reimbursement, then we'll just have to move forward and start. Yes, sir. I mean, it's not going to hold us up. But I just didn't want to start and then the reimbursement not be in effect because we started.
right, understood. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
I guess we need to open it up for public comment on item C. Anybody wishing to comment on item number 6 under section C for time extensions? All right, there being none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion on item number 6.
All right, well, a couple of quick comments that I'll make a motion. I mean, it sounds, I was kind of on the fence, honestly, but I appreciate that the applicant showed up. And from what he said, it sounds like they are moving forward. Everything's ready, and I do know from working with these reimbursement agreements, there's a stipulation you can't start construction until it's approved or you won't get reimbursed. So I can understand waiting for that. So with that, I'll make a motion that we approve item 6, the time extension request.
Motion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Moving on to item number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So item 7 is a zoning case 0422-02. This is a request from the FR to the RS 4.5 district. As you can see on your screen, this is located on kind of the southwest area of the city, near the intersection of Old Brownsville Road and Saratoga Boulevard. So currently, the property is located within the West Side Area Development Plan. It is currently zoned FR Farm Rural. The proposed use is single-family residential, which is consistent with our future land use map of medium-density residential. There are existing uses around the property. The majority are agriculture, but you do have one mobile home park to the west. Now, one of the questions that has come up is regarding the air installation compatibility use zone. Now, this one is involving Corpus Christi International, so it's not a true ACUS as you see with military installations. Back in 2013, when the joint land use study was done, this was designated as a safety subzone, but it is something that we have received comment from the airport, but it is not to the same threshold as the installations that the military currently operates out of that are actually owned by the federal government. But nevertheless, it is, a portion of it is located within APZ, what we would call APZ2, but again, APZ2 is truly safety subzone, not APZ2. Of the 13 notices mailed out, we received 1 in opposition and 1 in favor. Now, staff analysis and recommendation. One of the big questions that came up was the review of a traffic impact analysis. Now, as you know, Saratoga Boulevard is a TxDOT right-of-way, so that involves their review of such an analysis. Now, we are still waiting for results from TxDOT, so as part of our recommendation would be to table the case until we receive final word from TxDOT on their review and their discussion of potential impact of the number of maximum density of homes along Saratoga. In discussing this with the applicant, he too agrees and has also requested that the case be tabled, and I believe Mr. Brazelton's present. But nevertheless, we're standing by that request to table, and with that, if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Commissioner York?
Yeah, can you clarify? It says here that a TIA has been submitted, but it sounded like you were saying TxDOT is the applicant paying for a TIA, or is TxDOT doing the study?
The applicant did conduct the traffic impact analysis. Part of the review, how we vet the TIA is it goes through traffic engineering as far as the city is concerned, but because it is a TxDOT right-of-way, it has to go to a partner agency, that being TxDOT itself. Of course, they do have a little bit of a backlog, and so in discussions with the applicant, if there are ways of adjusting the request or looking into the details of how we can reach out to TxDOT and see if we can move that analysis higher up on their priority list. But nevertheless, we didn't want to penalize the staff recommendation based on some variables that are still out there. So that is why we're asking for the additional time. And of course, the idea would be we still hold the public hearing, comments are still generated, so it doesn't incur a re-notice requirement. So it keeps the process moving forward as expeditiously as possible.
Right. I want to ask that on that, and I'm fine with the tabling, but you said a bit of a backlog, and I can tell you from experience that's a huge understatement. Just a simple driveway permit has taken 6 to 9 months. So in case that happens, has staff considered allowing this to move forward, making a recommendation? I mean, it doesn't seem like a TIA would really change the use.
Yes.
That's more of an engineering. They may have to change how they connect to Saratoga or something, but it seems like this could potentially move forward. I just wonder if y'all have considered that.
Yes, absolutely. The idea would be if we can, we've had some preliminary discussions with TxDOT. I just didn't want to jeopardize the zoning case, and we get further on. Let's say we didn't say anything, it passes this body, moves on to council, and a month from now, TxDOT says, well, hold on, we disagree. I just want to make sure we don't have this zoning case caught in the crosshairs between the two committees in deciding the case, and we now have to adjust staff recommendation. It would be better at least to get some type of preliminary answer from TxDOT. So believe me, I've been making a lot of phone calls to motivate them to at least just take a look, give me a rough idea if they agree or disagree.
Okay. And does staff have a recommended time for tabling, or are y'all asking for 1 week, 2 weeks to the next meeting, or a couple of meetings?
I would say we would, the idea by having the public hearing is that we wouldn't have to renotice. Everything has been open, discussion has occurred, but we would definitely I would guess more than a few meetings by the time it comes back, and that's assuming there isn't adjustment in the request itself.
So you would not be looking for a specific date? Or?
At this point, no.
Okay, thanks.
Andrew, what's the normal protocol on these plats when we have to get a traffic study done? I know this came up on the Del Mar Southside campus. I mean, is this case being handled just like every other case? I mean, what's the normal protocol?
Sure.
And I guess I'm wondering if this goes against, how did it get scheduled, and then now we're recommending tabling? Just curious.
Standard protocol is that a TIA is submitted and resolved prior to even the submission of a plat or even a building permit, and especially with a rezoning. The idea would be, with zoning, you dance a fine line between things that are more related to platting than land use. So that is why we allowed this to keep progressing forward, to get it in front of Planning Commission, to at least start the conversation. Just as Commissioner York brought up, we didn't want to penalize the applicant for a potential backlog from TxDOT, so at least the board has had a chance to ask questions, and of course, when we bring it back, that opportunity will happen again, but one of the check boxes has occurred, so it's not just, we can't even take your application. We'll start the process with you and work with the applicant to keep it moving forward.
Commissioner Miller?
Couple of questions. Now, you mentioned Corpus Christi International Airport is not going to be part or of the proposed AQ's overlay?
The briefing that we'll have in a couple of items, that is a true statement, that Corpus Christi International isn't on this phase. There is discussion of a potential future phase in which we would look at Corpus Christi International, the other hat the Planning Commission wears as the Airport Zoning Commission, if there's potentiality of zoning areas outside of the city limits using the authority of that board. Those are happening in future phases, but the briefing you're going to hear tonight is primarily focused on the military installations.
Right. And which runway is this within the APZ2 of?
This is the north-south runway. I want to say that is 1335 runway.
Is that a heavily used runway or?
That is the primary receiving runway. There's very few departures coming south unless it's oriented for touch-and-go trainings, and there is some government or military-related aircraft that still use Corpus Christi International. Those are the flights that are heading south over this property.
So it'd be mostly on approach?
Correct, and it would be from the opposite end.
All right.
Would be your approach.
That's all the questions I had.
All right, no other questions for staff? Is the applicant here and like to speak?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Bart Brazelton Development, working with MVR Construction on this plat. We've agreed to go to tabling to discuss the eventualities of what's come up. We're somewhat troubled that during a zoning phase that a state agency can stop progress in a city. So we will be back discussing that consideration with the city. That was very recent, had come up very recently in the discussions. We went into this without that in place, but at the last minute, before it was printed or before y'all got it, there was a change. So we will be back visiting with the city, but we are quite concerned about a state agency being relied upon to shut down a local project.
Commissioner Miller?
Oh, no. But I did have a point of clarification, that state agency being the...
TxDOT.
TxDOT, right. Got it.
So I'm assuming now TxDOT can shut down the city of Corpus Christi at will.
Commissioner York?
Just want to clarify, I know staff usually does a good job at getting with the applicant to make sure you guys are okay with any tabling, but they're asking for an indefinite tabling to go back and wait this out. Are y'all okay with that, or?
No, we're not going to agree to that at all.
So are you asking that this not be tabled?
I'm asking this to be tabled. We have asked to table this for this meeting.
Okay. And to be re-reviewed when?
In the very near future.
The following meeting, or?
It may be, the following is, as I understand, is potentially possible, but it may be the one following that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to open up item number 7 for any public comment. There being none, I'm going to close the public comment hearing for item number 7 and would look for a motion on this item.
I just have a question. Sorry, I just have a question for the staff.
Yes,
Are
sir.
we able to table this indefinitely till?
No, it would not be indefinite. The UDC itself has rules that you cannot, just hold a zoning case hostage. It does still have to progress, of course, through the process. Believe me, I completely understand Mr. Brazelton's frustration, and we are motivating TxDOT the best we can to move it up or to give us some type of preliminary finding. The goal is not to hamstring anyone's development. The goal is that we don't want to set a development up for failure. And when I say that is, all of you know the number of zoning cases we have along Yorktown. Each one of those generates a significant number of future traffic counts and commercial development. With Yorktown only being a 2-lane road, very much the same lesson we learned with Slough Road. It's not that we're against the number of homes or the density. The idea is we just want to make sure that TxDOT agrees that the roadway can accept that number of potential vehicle trips. We just don't want to have a negative reflection on our future staff recommendation.
Commissioner York?
Just want to make sure if we were to table this to a specific date, couple of meetings out, looks like June 1st would be that date.
The first meeting
I'm
in June.
assuming if we get there and for some reason TxDOT said, oh, wait, we needed another week, we can always table it again, right?
Of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Not that we advocate for that. We want to keep the process moving, believe me.
Okay, we'll look for a motion on item number 7.
I make a motion that we table item 7 to the June 1st Planning Commission hearing.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Moving on to number 8, text amendment for the Unified Development Code.
Okay, well, everybody's looking at me, so I'll just go ahead and keep going.
Guess you're up, Andrew.
So this amendment to the UDC, which I'm sure most of you have heard, is about water trust funds within the city limits and editing language for the wastewater trust funds to ensure, that's a very long way of saying we want to make sure water and wastewater trust fund policy matches. So a quick overview is City Council has directed staff to amend the UDC to limit the use of water trust funds to primarily only within the city limits, meaning the City Council has said we're not going to approve reimbursements or use of the trust funds outside of the city limits into what we all know as the OCL territory. Below that are the 2 excerpts of the code that apply from the UDC itself. Of the Water Trust Fund, it's amended by specifically adding a line to say no reimbursement shall be available for improvements outside of the city limits. There is, of course, a catch, and that says you can still be eligible if you go through the process of annexation, you actually begin that process to keep moving forward. The goal is to get people inside of the city. With the Wastewater Trust Fund, very similarly, no reimbursement shall be available for improvements outside of the city limits, and mirroring language for eligibility of the Wastewater Trust Fund. So as you can see, some language was struck in red. We as staff, of course, recommend approval as given direction by council of the amendments to the UDC. And if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them as best as I can.
Commissioner York?
Sorry, I'm very talkative today, apparently. First question, did this amendment go through any vetting like the DS tag or something like that?
I do not believe so. This was a direct, I don't want to say decree, but it was direction given to us specifically by the city council. So it did not go through any additional outreach efforts.
Okay, well, and the reason I ask is because just reading it, and I didn't know this was even on here until I was looking at it right before the meeting, immediately kind of poke some holes in it like we would in a DS tag meeting, because I see problems that this is going to create. I actually have a client that had come into this situation, and they not even a developer. They wanted to build a building, like a metal building for I think it's a dumpster business, and they happened to be in the ETJ, and they received city water. And so city said, well, you're in the ETJ, you have to plat to pull a building permit. And then when they platted, the city said, well, there's a master plan water line planned for front of your property, you have to build it. And, you know, they got kind of dragged into this. And what I'm getting at is I see some problems in here that I think need to be addressed, and I really want to see this tabled and maybe go through DS tag or at least get vetted a little bit, because in that particular case, you know, one of the requirements that's creating a problem for them is if they were in the county, they don't have to have fire protection. It's up to them. You know, they can pay higher insurance. But in the ETJ, the city says you have to follow our code, therefore you have to have fire protection. which means they would have to build a new water main. And it just, especially in that case, it seems like if you're going to require somebody to build an 8-inch water main, why not build the 12 so you're not ripping out a perfectly good 8-inch water main in a few years and putting in a 12? So I think it needs to be massaged a little bit. I understand the intent and not wanting to waste a bunch of money outside the city limits, and I agree with that. But I think, like we do in those meetings, people like myself that do this all the time see potential issues that come up. I think we want to massage the language, and I'm hoping we can maybe table that. It's just my opinion. What I want to ask you is, if we were to table this till the next meeting, can we convene the group to look at this, kind of poke holes in it, and maybe add some language to take care of some of these issues, or at least discuss them? Is something that could happen in 2 weeks?
Commissioner, you make absolutely great sense, right? It wasn't vetted. It was just kind of forced on us to do, right? As a matter of fact, that Tuesday that this was kind of, the decree was issued, for the first time since I've been here in only 2 years, council denied a reimbursement request, right? And the reason they denied it is, well, this guy's not even in the city limits. Why would we give trust fund money to a guy that's not in the city limits? My response was, well, wait a second. That gentleman plats, and he's going to pay lot and acreage fees. Shouldn't he have access to the trust funds? That vetting would have occurred at a DS-TAG meeting, but because this is kind of moving faster than we'd like, it did not happen. So I support your request to table, and I'll certainly get with the city manager saying, look, this is kind of what the recommendation was, and I really support that recommendation because there's a lot of things that have to happen. If someone's going to plat outside an ETJ and they can't get trust fund money, then they shouldn't be allowed to pay. Just like we have the wastewater exemption, they should have the same exemption for water, right? So that it's equal playing field. This way it wouldn't be equal. So all those things haven't been vetted yet, and I support your request to table. And of course, when the city manager gets back in town, certainly I'll revisit this with him. Because I think it's the right thing to do, actually.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you make a great point about the fees. They are, being in the ETJ, they have to pay all those fees, and so they should get a say in how they're, at least have a chance to go before council and use those fees for stuff they're being required to build, or maybe not have to pay the fees. But all that stuff, I think, could be put into this language where if you're OCL and you don't want to build this line, then maybe you don't have to pay those fees. So let me ask you one additional thing then. If we were to go back and table this, would it be better to do the June 1st meeting? I mean, how long do you think we would need to properly vet this?
So we are just assembling the DS-TAG, and I can't remember, Nina, but we're assembling the DS-TAG because we are, for the text amendments that Andrew mentioned that we're doing, it's some real heavy lifting. It's Article 8, it's 5, it's 4, it's 6. So it's not even this, right? It's just a lot of stuff. So we could get that group together and kind of make this the first item, but it surely won't be it'll take some time, maybe by the end of June, but not necessarily the 1st of June.
Okay, and I'm just looking for a date. I don't mind, I understand that, council can direct staff to push things through, and if you have to do what you've been asked to do, and you're just doing your job, and I don't mind, being the bad guy, I guess, and saying, I think we need to pump the brakes here. So I'm just trying to figure out, if we're going to pump the brakes, let's do it right. You're thinking DS-TAG could convene at the end of June?
No, it might be sooner. Is it mid-June, possibly?
We can bring the item back the second meeting.
Probably.
Second meeting in June.
In June, right, which is probably the last.
The 5th, thank you, the 15th. It's a good opportunity to kind of knock off the ring rust from the last DS-TAG meeting and get everyone back on the either virtual room or in physical.
Okay, and just to clarify, you're saying we could come back to Planning Commission on June 15th, or DS-TAG could potentially meet the middle of June? Because we could go to the June 29th meeting.
Well, we're going to try to assemble that group before the end of this month, and maybe
Okay.
have our first meeting before the end of this month, if possible. If we've already got in touch with everyone, and those who do not want to be on that committee, we've let them go, and have some who still want to be on the committee. We tapped some other individuals to take the place of those who wanted to leave. So I think we're about ready to engage, to say, hey, we need to have our meetings. We're just kind of deciding now, virtual or in person, and we think virtual is easier because no one has to leave the office. They can just kind
I
of do it in
support
front of
that.
their. So anyway, so
Okay.
it'll be sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schroeder?
This, I guess, bothers me for the reason, Director, that you mentioned here. It's kind of the other side of the coin, in that a lot of times these outside the city limits, or, and then I think the next step, if we get this properly vetted, then the folks that try to put in and build a facility to maneuver around a lot of this stuff, life safety code, other things, where we don't have to put it in because we're out here, it will start to rein that in. But setting up a situation where they're made aware of this when they bring the plat, which is going to be difficult, I think, is important, because that's letting them know up front that you're not going to be permitted to dodge these things simply because you want to put some certain type of facility and not comply with other things. Just professionally, I've been approached a number of times about designing some kind of facility outside city limit in the ETJ, or even out in the county, in a situation that I know what that would have to be designed for, and what it should meet, wouldn't be achievable, and they go to the next person, and that's fine, because I'm not going to put myself in a liability situation like that. But having that right up front, that you're going to have to meet the life safety code in the ETJ for these, and therefore if it's a facility that requires sprinkling, and they can't, you can't get a large, because I understand exactly why the council has a knee jerk on this, that, well, we don't, they don't want to commit money, because you can find a lot of water lines out there in the ETJ that are just out there.
Of course.
And people are trying to grab those all the time without, I think that's largely been controlled. But we're going to see a lot more of this,
Well,
if this isn't vetted. So I completely agree with Commissioner York in your position but we're going to have to deal with it from both sides.
Understood, and and the vetting is required because it's a much bigger issue than just what we're looking at, because where does the city expand if they're going to grow? In the ETJ, right? So what I assume the city tried to do to get ahead of that is says, okay, if you want my water, then as a part of the contract, or a condition of the contract, getting our water, if you're in a CCN, is that you have to then plat, and you have to comply with all the city development codes. That links them to us, right? So yesterday, they could be an ETJ, and if they say, okay, I want water, they would, whether it's trust fund or whatever, they could then hit the trust fund and say, look, I need so much X amount of dollars to get that to my front door, right? And they happily comply with all city development codes. But for example, if we're not going to require that anymore, it's odd, because what you're saying is that then if there's no city involvement, then they can build whatever they want to build, and then say if the city does grow that way, we'll inherit something that really doesn't meet our standards or comply with our standards, or it's just a much bigger issue than just saying, hey, are we going to allow this or not? Because the ETJ is where cities really expand in the future, right? So the master plans that we're working on now through the master planning impact fee process includes that 5-mile ETJ around the city, with the exception of the roads. The roads can't go outside the city limits, but it'll certainly include that in terms of infrastructure expansion with stormwater, wastewater, and water services. So it's kind of an oxymoron, but we have to vet that. We hadn't had an opportunity to vet that. So the DS tag will certainly flush those things out. And this may need, ultimately, this probably will die because it's not good for us in the future, in theory, because the ETJ really is our next city boundary in some years out. So anyway, but we'll get that process.
Well, and it's also going to be, it's also another thing that is, I think, has to be linked to the impact fees, and the impact fees is something that's going to help this make this clearer and less vague. But we do have to make sure that they are integrated, because the trust fund mechanism and the ETJ combined make it more gray or fuzzy gray or something, because it has a whole lot of consequences and seemingly little impact if these things aren't enforced. So,
I think my 2 cents on this is what I'm seeing here is a troubling trend. We had this with the landscaping ordinance where, I think City Council decided they wanted this project done, and they completely bypassed the vetting that's in place. It's in place for a reason. And, again, I think we've got a horrible ordinance with the landscaping that doesn't work in certain areas that got pushed through, and shame on the council for doing that. And I think in this case, here's another attempt of that, and we have DSAG set up for a reason, and it's to garner the expertise of people that do this work every day, not to hurt the city or not to hurt the objectives, but really to work together to help staff, whether it's an engineer's background or a developer or a builder, architects. I think collective opinions of everybody makes it stronger. And again, here's another example where we get a cram down, hey, we got directive, let's get it done. And staff does the best job that they can, and then they meet resistance, and these types of things, I think, destroy trust, and the public input and transparency, I think, are important. So, I will tell you, I would wholeheartedly support tabling this item, but I really think we've got to be disciplined to use things that are in place, and that DSAG's for a reason. And it felt like, this just got bypassed by DSAG. In fact, that I think, was there a meeting scheduled that got canceled?
There was there was one meeting canceled in March due to the Easter holidays.
Well, I know there's great volunteers on that are willing to help, and I think, what we all want is development codes to help our city, and let's all grow together. But it bothers me when we try and do these end arounds. So that's all I've got. Commissioner York.
Thanks. Just out of curiosity, Mr. Raymond, with your experience in other cities working with impact fees, are impact fees typically, I'm sure every city may be different, but just generally, are impact fees able to be used outside the city limits for certain things?
Absolutely, except for roads.
Okay.
So water, wastewater, stormwater, yes. Roads, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
And I wanted to say, Mr. Chair, Andrew and I and Nina have talked about the fear that this body or the citizens at large this kind of rushing of ordinances leads to that mistrust, right? And because I'm going to be bringing to this group a volume of things after it's vetted through the DS tag, and it's different, right? It's different from what we've seen, and I would like to start from a point of trust and not the way you're feeling, or maybe many of you are feeling now because of what's happening. But I want you to understand something, right? Like many of you, perhaps, we have a boss that says jump, and we basically say how high, and we do our best to frame it and craft it so that it's easily understood. And if you ask the question like you did, Commissioner York, well, why didn't you vet this? Well, we didn't have an opportunity to vet it, right? Because we were directed to move this along. So I don't, and I'm saying all this to say I don't want to build mistrust, right? I think that's where I started a few years ago, from a position of distrust, and I think we've come a long way from that. So I'm being very transparent and honest. If we do table it, we'll certainly vet it. I still got to go back to my boss and say, hey, we had to table this, and that may come with a huge tongue lashing, who really knows? But I think it's the right thing to do, and that's what we're going to do, and that's what we really try to do. And so I don't want you to lose faith in what we're doing, and particularly with some of the other items we're going to bring forward tonight. So just wanted to say that. Sir.
Yeah, no, and believe me, I mean, we all got bosses, and sometimes they ask us to do things that we don't want to do, and certainly I understand their position you're in, but I think part of why each and every one of us are here on the Planning Commission is to try and balance what the public interest is versus what the needs of the city are, and like I said, this is a play that we've seen our city manager do, and I don't mind being the bad guy, because I hate seeing that, and I don't mind speaking up. Like I said, I think we deserve better, and we'll do everything we can to make this process better.
And thank you for your honesty, Al.
Okay, with no other questions for staff, I'd like to open up item number 8 for public comment. Mr. Sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, sir. My name's Wayne Lundquist, and I wasn't even here for this item tonight, but I'm glad I'm able to talk. Myself, I'm the one that Mr. Raymond was talking about a month ago. We started a plat 2.5 years ago, 26 months ago, out on Staples, out of the city limits by about 500 or 600 yards within the ETJ. We had numerous meetings with the county. First, we had to go through the county before we got to the city to get everything approved by them. Finally, we got that all approved. Then we had numerous meetings with the city. Every time we were assured, there's a master plan for a 12-inch water line out there. We don't need a 12-inch water line we got like a 28-lot subdivision. But we were required to put in a 12-inch water line. We were assured on 2 different occasions, oh yes, we're going to get reimbursed. That's what the city always does. And then, like Mr. Raymond said, he was completely blindsided the day we went to the city council. For some reason, all of a sudden, after, I don't know how many years, they've done this every time. When you build a 12-inch water line that's required and you don't need it, they reimburse you. But since we're outside the city limits, they wouldn't let us do it. Of course, we would be happy to be annexed, but there's a catch-22. You can't be annexed unless you're, adjacent to another city property. Well, we're about 500 or 600 yards away from the city property. So, but it's just nuts that now we're building a smaller water line. They're saying we can build a smaller water line, but in the future, there's a 12-inch water line is going to be needed out Staples. So I just don't understand. Michael's got it completely right. This needs to be vetted more, because it's just unfair.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Lundquist.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Commissioners, again. Mr. Chairman, Bart Brazelton, Brazelton Development, 5337 Yorktown. Just wanted to add to a little bit more in general. Now, I haven't been around the entire time. I know I look it, but I haven't been around the entire time. But the trust funds have worked for 40 years. The trust funds are what built the entire south side and what built the northwest and what built the island. This change in wording would have prevented all of that. This change in wording completely changes the use and the ability of the trust funds to grow the city. The trust funds were specifically created to be used on the periphery of the city limits to grow the city. By the way, the trust funds were never envisioned to be the only money used to grow the city. However, for the last 30 of those 40 years, it essentially has been. There have been 2 or 3 city projects I can think of. This wording, Commissioner York says it well. This wording is I'll add to, this is an end run around the annexation change. And this is being used to kill the trust funds. If the trust fund wording was its interpretation was changed about 4 years ago. Prior to 4 years ago, the trust funds were used to grow the city, not to go out and replace one water line outlying way out in the city. They were used to grow the city. Plats were usually connected. That interpretation changed, and we fought it. We as developers, we as the Builders Association fought it, and we lost. And millions of dollars were extracted from the trust funds for a purpose that never before had been allowed. So I just wanted to give that background to this commission and completely support your decision, your desire to table this, because this will fundamentally change the only growth mechanism we have had in this city, which has all been done with private money, not public money. And this leads you right down the path to impact fees and no longer private control of growth. That's what impact fees are. They are not private control of growth. They are public control of growth. I hope that I can learn more about the trust fund, the impact fees and how they're coming. I understand there may be some great things about them. But this wording would fundamentally change the trust funds, and it would stop growth in its tracks. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on item number 8? There being none, I'll close the public comment period and ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we table item 8 to the June 15th Planning Commission hearing and ask that staff send this proposed text amendment through the proper vetting channels and groups and whatever's available to get this vetted.
Just to be clear, that's for the DSAG group?
Is it DS tag, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
DS tag, but I would remove we're probably going to assemble later this month. So I would say I remove that date certain and just say, hey, after it's been vetted by this group.
I'm fine with that. I thought we always had to propose a date. I guess that's just because of the public hearing.
Only if you have to send out notices. So this is
Okay.
it's a recommendation. So we're not quite at that step yet.
Did we just let that motion die?
Withdraw your motion.
You can amend.
I'll withdraw that motion and make a new motion that we table item number 8 until it is able to be properly vetted and have public comment as it should have.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 9, a briefing.
Good afternoon, evening, Commissioners, Chair. My name is Michael Dice. I'm the Assistant Director of the Building Division for Development Services. I'm here to brief you on the STAR program. So again, we get asked a lot of questions, DSD, like what the hell's going on with TxDOT? Where'd you get that cool badge? But one of our most often asked questions is, can you recommend somebody? I'm building this, I'm doing that. I need a ceiling fan installed. Ethically, we can't recommend anybody. if I recommend York over someone else, at that point, I'm giving favoritism. So what we've done as a customer service initiative is to promote this program, which is going to promote a voluntary program that's going to promote a more professional contractor community here in the city of Corpus. So the goals that we're going to have, that this is going to, assist citizens in finding qualified contractors. It's going to provide clear understanding of what the program is and the requirements. Partner with the local contractors by providing free training, which a lot of people think is unheard of, but we're going to provide free training for contractors at least monthly. Again, with that, we want to promote good, well-qualified local contractors to the citizens. And finally, promoting the professionalism in the local contractor community. So ultimately, what is STAR? It stands, we'll try to make it cool, stands for Safety, Training, Accountability, and Registration. So registration is going to have different categories. Obviously, everybody's going to have different level of experience, different time in the city, and those things I'll discuss in a little bit later. To make it easily recognizable, we're using kind of the gold medal, gold star kind of setup: bronze, silver, and gold. Obviously, bronze being the lowest, silver being middle, and gold being the most qualified. So what we have here is a bronze star. So basically, it's your application. Everybody now who's a contractor, you have to register. Even a homeowner has to register. It's simply just data entry: who you are, where you live, what you do, so on and so forth. So we would still have that. We would have a code of ethics acknowledgement. So basically, this just it's, and I've got a backup slide I'll show you, but you're ensuring that you're going to work to the best to ensure health and safety of the jobs you do. You pledge to maintain insurance. You refrain from deceptive behavior. Basically, all the things that good contractors already do. Again, it's going to promote good contracting. Provide general proof of insurance. Again, what we're looking at for the insurance model is exactly what TDLR recommends. And the reason we're doing that is somebody who's already an electrical contractor or a plumbing contractor already has to do stuff for the state. They have to maintain a minimum level of insurance. We're not going to ask for anything beyond that. We want to make sure that those people have those types of insurance. Obviously, to have your state license, you have to have that. But the other contractors that aren't necessarily regulated by TDLR would also have a minimum level insurance, again, providing that level of protection for the citizens or the people that hire them. And again, a background check, already required by TDLR for most licenses. If one is provided by us for the contractor, we would just verify. If they can't get a background check or they haven't gone, we'll be able to use a system that the city has. It's $10. Oh, and I didn't mention, the registration process is all free. There's no charge for this program. Free, Wendy, free. So the Silver Star program, it's adding to the bronze. You've got your application, your code of ethics, your general proof of insurance, the background check. Silver is going to add that you've had no related contractor infractions or complaints. That's kind of a model that's set up with the Better Business Bureau. Any complaints that would come in, we would investigate. We would found or unfound based with directors Al Raymond's decision. Any decision that's made obviously can be appealable. We're looking to have a process that is good for everybody, citizens and the contractors. We want to make sure it's fair. Anything that's unfounded, obviously, will not be used in any way against a contractor. DSD, like I said, DSD approved trainings, at least 2 per year will be required by the contractor. We already train twice a month, so we already have those in place, but we're going to dedicate at least one of those monthly specifically to a contract-related issue. That way, they'll have at least 26 or so times to come in and train. Beyond that, you can do, ICC has online training, proof of training will work. We're already doing training. We had one actually today and yesterday for fire block training. That was free to the public as well. We paid for a consultant to come in and give that fire training. So we're starting to offer a lot more of those. The contractor would have to have at least 2 per year. And again, ultimately just be caught up on all your fees, that any fees are not outstanding. Gold Star, again, it's the bronze, silver already met. At that point, this is where it really starts to emphasize longstanding members of the local community and local contractors. You would need to have a minimum registration with DSD for 5 years. Again, to get that level, you want to have roots in the community. At least one agent of the contractor maintains an ICC certification or a certification that's been approved by the director. For whatever reason, if you're like a solar guy and there's a solar training, we'll be able to take those certifications if you don't have anything specifically for ICC. And most importantly, we're looking at promoting membership to local professional organizations. So whether or not you're with a organization like what's in the back, any organization that is available, it promotes accountability within, because a lot of organizations self-regulate. So we want to promote that gold level as being someone who's got roots in the community, someone that's well-trained, and someone that's locally active. So this simply is just a breakdown of how it kind of compares in a spreadsheet. Like I said, the bronze star is your base, silver adds to it, and then gold is ultimately. So what we'll end up doing is we'll promote the list of contractors online. First, it'll be with an Excel spreadsheet. We're working to a new software system right now that will be able to take data as it comes in and put it within it's a searchable database. I forget the actual name right now. But we'll have it on a spreadsheet. It'll be on our website. So when anybody asks us that question, hey, I need to find Joe contractor to do X job, we can say, hey, go to our website. Even in an Excel spreadsheet, you'll be able to filter columns. Filter what you need, look at, and then it's up to that citizen or that customer to actually decide on, do I want to go with this guy? Do I want to go with that person? So on and so forth. It allows them to make a better quality decision. And again, it's voluntary. The people that are on this don't have to do this. They could be without. But by us as a department promoting it, we're hoping that people will get on board. And again, the minimum levels of requirements are pretty easy. Again, it's standard. We're basing it on TDLR. So most of our trade contractors would already qualify. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Quick brief. You guys have any questions?
Yeah, I got a couple.
Okay.
Some of the other commissioners have. On the insurance requirements, are you requiring just general liability insurance or workers' comp insurance or?
So the state levels for TDR, 300 per occurrence, 300,000 per occurrence, 600,000 property, and 300,000 aggregate. Again, that's required for electrical contractors, mechanical contractors, and plumbing contractors. So those insurances would already take in the entire bulk of who are already registered and licensed with the state to do work in the state, let alone Corpus.
And then on the registrations with the city, is that like 5 years from when they get into the STAR program, or do you have an ability to search?
Anybody that's been here forever, again, our system goes back to 2016 right now, current system.
So you could look and say, hey, these guys pulled a permit back in 16, so they've been with us, or?
Yeah, so anybody that's already been here that meets those gold qualifications will already be in the gold level program.
Very good. Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes, sir. Is the program's already in place?
No. This is a briefing. We're going to take it to council in June.
Okay.
We have to modify a little bit of Chapter 14 because this, although voluntary, it is something we want to make sure that we promote and that we have it laid out, that I've been here 3 years. I hope to be here a lot longer, but just in case I'm not here, I don't want anybody screwing with what I've worked out. I want it to be in code.
Okay. And last question, on the training, as far as like, what do y'all have like for the DSD, the 2-year training? What are some of the, like, say you have a sheetrocker contractor or, insulator,
Well, and that actually brings up a good question. So this is specifically to contractors that are pulling permits. A lot of the times, somebody that does cabinets or painting or tile, they're not going to need to pull a permit. So they don't really have a necessity to be in this program. Not saying they can't. So if I'm a tile contractor and I meet, I have an IC certification, I have all this other stuff, I've been registered with the city, you'll be able to do that. It's specifically targeting those contractors that need to pull permits. But specifically, what we're looking at is doing every year, you would just come in and make sure that when you re-register, just like we do now, we ask, hey, are you up to date on this? Are you up to date on that? We make sure that the data is good. We would do the same thing. The volunteer program is ultimately up to the contractor to make sure that they notify us that they've had changes in their, either be it their insurance or if they've gotten a ICC certification, they have to tell us so we can update the system and make sure that it's most accurate for citizens to look at.
So if they are, like, let's just say a contractor that doesn't require a permit, they can still voluntarily choose to be a part of the program?
Yeah,
and
we
they
have
will be
we
part
have
of
a
the
section that
database?
says other.
Okay, other,
Yeah.
okay.
And we may break it down even further subcategories, but right now it's just simply other. We would kind of describe some of the work. I know there's contractors that do everything from, concrete to, and everything in between concrete to building a new home. So we want to make sure that everybody has the ability to pick and choose. The citizens, customers have the ability to pick and choose based on the service that they're trying to look for.
Yeah, okay, good. I think that's positive. That's awesome.
Commissioner Schroeder.
This is frankly long overdue, and I'm glad it's coming. Since I know that the state prides itself on not licensing general contractors, it's the general public that suffers from that. I know people love to say that that they've got a guy, or they've got that guy that flies under the radar, whatever. But the folks sitting in the back know how much of a loss of tradecraft we have here in this, and they have to go through it all the time as being, developers of subdivisions and things. They have to maintain all those insurance requirements, so they know what it means to have to do that. But I am so tired of having to vet for every client the guy that wants to come in with a handful of guys and do some part of a job and then realize they don't know how to build the rest of it and walk away. It's for those people that are trying to develop a small commercial project or a residential addition or small residential project, and they don't have all of this information. They don't know how to vet. In my practice, we try to take that on for them. We don't get paid for it. We spend hours trying to attempt to vet people or attempt to walk people through how to do a project. Don't have the first inkling of how to do this. What's really interesting is as soon as you require that general contractor to have some semblance of insurance, it's amazing how quick he asks for it from all the rest of his subs. But when they don't have it, they don't, because there's virtually no liability on them unless you sue them. But most of the time they depend on these projects not being big enough to be able to so it's all about whether you can bring an attorney to bear on them. And they know how to walk that line. That it's going to cost you more to go get that than in the legal services, and they know they can walk on it. So where this is really going to come home to roost is when we get a major storm.
Correct.
And you've got all these people flying down here because if anybody who worked with anybody over in those areas that were affected, I personally had a client that we fired 3 contractors. And it was not a major, should not have been a significant job. They couldn't get any of the established people. They were already booked up. The people that we knew that had good reputations and things like that. But these people that come in, you attempt to vet them. You attempt to look at the work that they've done. You attempt to, but that was somebody that had a little bit of means to hire somebody to help represent them. You look at all those people that are living with that poor work, that are waiting for the next storm to deal with that, they're just out of luck. So I really commend that we're doing this. I really hope it's successful because we absolutely need it.
Commissioner Miller?
Well, as a general contractor that probably qualifies as gold as it sits, I'm kind of afraid, can I identify as bronze so that people don't think I'm too expensive?
I'm not going to get into how you identify.
Okay. And then,
Again, it's voluntary.
right.
So
And it's
that's up to you
voluntary
whether or
and
not
it's
you
free.
wanna-
But how's it being funded? Just out of
Free, there's
curiosity.
no, I mean, we already data entry everybody. All we're going to be adding is a little bit of,
But the training
a
component,
tiny bit, well, we already do training.
okay.
We already do that. So we're trying to provide, and we're even doing other outside trainings, not just our normal twice a month. Like I said, we just had that. We did a training, oh God. We've done other trainings. But, yeah, so it's already within the realm of what we do. And again, the primary maintenance factor of this is on the contractor. If you're a bronze and you've hit your 5 years, you take an ICC or certification, well, that's up to you to tell us, hey, I want to be gold. You provide that stuff to us, we verify it. It's simply just adding one extra layer of data entry to our permit technicians. It's really not a whole lot. And the background check, again, it's a $10 background check. It's the same background check they use for the health department. Again, if you're already an electrician, a plumber, a mechanical contractor with TDLR, you've already done it. They're actually going to fingerprints this year. So you would just provide your license information because the state's already done that for us. So there's really not a whole lot that we have to do.
Cool.
I think it's, for some of us older builders in here, it's probably been since 2006 or 2008 since,
TRCC.
yeah, Texas Residential Construction Commission was around, and then that maybe lasted 2 or 4 years,
It was
I
2
think,
years,
before
yeah.
it
It
got
was a blink and it was
sunsetted. But
gone.
as far as I know, that's the last thing that's been around in terms of regulating,
That's it by the
residential.
state. Some
Yeah.
cities have a similar program. They have increased registration certifications. Some cities call it Premier, some cities call it something else, but I thought the Gold Star was kind of
Yeah,
cool.
I think the training opportunities are great, and, in fact, it's voluntary,
We
it's
had
good to-
10 or so contractors show up to our fire training that we just had over the last 2 days. I mean, if they were to take that on their own, that was $500. And we covered the cost. We had the guy down here to actually train our employees in fire. But since they were there, we opened it up to everybody.
Wonderful. Commissioner Gonzalez?
Although I didn't see you there, Mr. Miller. Next time. Okay.
One thing I'd like to see you guys consider is, I know it's mainly focused towards contractors that pull permits and things like that, but I think since you're pretty much already there, instead of like referring to like the painters, the floor guys as other, I would like to see maybe like some focus in that area, because it encourages the contractors to get the insurance. It encourages them to resolve issues, so that they don't get the complaints. Because really, that's where a lot of, I see where a lot of people are taking advantage of. It's not so much maybe building the house or doing an addition, but a lot of times it's just a basic interior remodel. And so I love the program, and I would just like to see is the emphasis that it's given to the other contractors, that it would be given to the, the mid-level or the low-level,
Okay.
kind of idea.
Make it available to more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, to more.
Commissioner Schroeder?
Well, that's why I think the point I distinction I made before is so critical, is that because currently this only applies to your licensed trades, which your electricians, your plumbers, and so if someone is hiring somebody who's going to go pull that permit, that's a handyman that operates in that very limited realm, and they represent that they can take on this project however limited it is. But if the city has a program that somebody can go and say, hey, well, who can I use, and can I, who can I hire to do this work, and they'll have to bring in that electrician. As it is now, the only one responsible is that electrician that they have to bring in, or that plumber that they have to bring in to do that bit of work. That person who's representing that they can manage this project to that homeowner or to that business owner, and they're not capable of it, well, well, they're left high and dry with the rest of it. They may get they may have the electrician held hostage, or they may have the plumber held hostage, but the rest of it's wide open. That guy walked. And so as soon as you if you have an insurance requirement to be part of this program, then if they're hired to do that job and they have a drywaller under them or they have someone else on it, guess what? They're going to require the same thing of those individuals. It gets straightened up real quick if we put it on the people who are coming pulled in the building permit. But the problem has always been the only thing we've required is the licensed trades. And so that person who is operating as a general contractor had no requirement to be a general contractor. There was no obligation on that other than either a bond was required, which was only required for major public projects, realistically, and we were always living off of the fact that it was a bond or whatever that was. But because we've got this very loose set of standards for people who operate as a general contractor, and the general public believes that there's all kinds of regulation on it. There's not.
I think the hard part is, just because you have a general liability insurance policy doesn't mean you know how to do the work,
Oh, absolutely. We don't have much to go by. I mean, that's the problem. We don't have a program for licensing contractors. And the state really people know that. I mean, as Commissioner Miller mentioned, reputable contract, it's all about your reputation. And so in general construction, you've got people who know how to do the work and they know how difficult it is. They know how capable they have to be. They have requirements for insurance on all of their subs. Any that drywall sub or that painter that's coming in, you bet they're going to require them to have something to prove they're going to come in and do that job. But it's the smaller work in the city that doesn't have any. If you're a small business owner, if you're a homeowner that wants an addition, you're not. The major subdivision developers out there, they don't have the ability, the time to take on those work. They're flush with building out all these homes, and they know, even themselves know how difficult it is to get tradecraft because their finished crews are bigger than their crews building the things. So these quality control crews that are coming in and correcting all these things, that's a big chunk of what's adding to all of these projects, and that's on new builds. But these guys that are try to pass themselves off of being capable of executing a project. And now I get the person that says you're adding to the cost of this project. Yeah, so be it. That problem is because we don't have it until we start building back tradecraft. So this program is requiring you to get, have some credential, have some, require guys to go out and get training.
Ultimately, this is going to promote the good contractor. That's what we want. Whether
Exactly.
you identify as gold or bronze or silver, the customer now has a tool that they can make a better informed decisions. And the reason I looked around to see if Andy was here, this is not going to put Andy Lascano out of business. He's still going to do bad contractor stories. It's not going to eliminate bad contractors. But what it does is it helps, the guy that wants to build the pool to spend his Christmas bonus on, like Christmas vacation. They'll be able to do that and have some better level of assurance that the guy or person that they're hiring has, be it a gold ability or silver ability. And we ultimately want to promote good contractors. Yeah. Good contractors make everybody look better. And that's ultimately what we want.
And that's if this didn't have teeth in it, I wouldn't support it. Just putting a sticker on somebody get to put a sticker on there. And granted, it's pretty limited, and I appreciate that you are be able to offer this as not. This is not a money-making scheme. This is a way for people to be able to have some assurance, some reliance that there is something behind this representation, and that's what any resident, any business owner, homeowner is looking for, because we don't have. We've basically covered our eyes and ears to the fact that we have lost so much skill level, so much tradecraft in our trades, and we're struggling to put the next generation of tradecraft out there right now, and we've just sort of buried. We've been hiding from the fact that we don't have it, and if we don't get it coming faster, and start really promoting these programs in schools better. And there are people trying to do it. And I appreciate it. I applaud it. And we try to support it ourselves in our practice because we know it's not there. We see it every day on jobs where it's just not there. And so this is one step to help getting there. And I'm all for any of the others that help promote this. And I do want to emphasize that if this was something that was just a hollow, you get to buy a sticker for your enterprise, I wouldn't support it at all, because that just further hides that fact from, many of these programs are just that. You get to buy a little, advertisement or something, and with social media the way it is, it obfuscates that to quite a degree.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely one tool you can use. I know Builders Association has some resources out there in terms of, providing customers with guidance on how do you pick a contractor, things like getting references on work that they've done, visiting with their suppliers on how they pay their bills, visiting with previous customers they built for to see how the project is. So this is not an end-all be-all, but I agree, it's another arrow in the quiver for homeowners to look at and validate.
Again, and a lot of people, they don't even know about the professional organizations. They immediately Google building permits, Corpus Christi, and the first thing that comes up is us and his handsome face. But we can't tell anybody where to go. I can just say, Google search painting contractor Corpus Christi. I mean, whoever paid the highest to get the first search gets it. This, again, is that tool, hopefully, that'll help them get there.
Commissioner
Real
Gallagher?
quick. What I was trying to say earlier is I like to see categories. Like if somebody was looking for a painter, somebody's looking for, that's what I was talking about. And then another thing, so this will be on a website where somebody can actually log in and, or would it be just like a tab on the city website?
So it'll actually be on the website. So on our main webpage, corpuschristi.com/DS, it'll be a login, it'll be a key where they just click it, and then from that point, you'll be able to search. Initially, again, we're going to be low tech. It'll be an Excel spreadsheet. It'll be filterable. And like I have on here, it may be hard to read on your screens, but at the top, it's type of work. So be able to signify, and this is draft. We may add more based on the comments here, like new homes, general repairs, additions, re-roof, pools, commercial, and then I have the asterisk for plumbing, electric, mechanical, because those are all state covered. We had, through the open comment period, the solar installers were like, hey, you need to have a category for solar. So we're open to expanding as much as needed. And if it's going to get granular, again, with a spreadsheet, it's not that hard.
Much.
And again, just to be sure, we're going to hopefully take it to council in June. We'll circle back with everybody, probably with you guys with a memo just for any changes that were suggested here.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to Director's Report.
Good luck, that's cute. Good evening, Commissioners. It's very interesting that I'm up here presenting this after I think you, Mr. Chair, said, hey, stuff is being just crammed down our throats, right? So I want to give a little backdrop before I start. When it was determined, however this happened, if you consider it knee-jerk or whatever, when it was determined that this is the path we wanted to go, and a couple of Tuesdays ago, maybe 3 Tuesdays ago, I presented to council an ordinance to request the joint meeting between this body and council, right? And at that time, we had developed a briefing memo, if you will, to this body, so you can say, well, what's this about, right? So that you would get an idea, so that you wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, what is this about, right? So when that briefing memo was kind of modified to a few sentences, that's when I reached out to you and said, hey, Mr. Chair, can we have a exec session so you guys will know what it is, so that when you get to the 17th, it's not like, what are we doing, right? And then my counsel, my favorite counsel, informed me that, hey, on Sunday, last Sunday, hey, it's going to be public information, right? Even though it doesn't get down into the granular details, it's public information, so there really is no need for a exec session. We're just going to, it'd be best just to do a briefing to you of what we're talking about, right? And as I was talking to you, things are changing so fast, and this presentation was literally changed, you know, partly before we got here, because things are happening so fast. We want to make sure we're covering all our bases. So this is a presentation. It's not in your packet, right, that we prepared, that keeps it at a, you know, 50,000-foot level. If you want to get granular, I have the experts here that can ask questions, because I want to make sure you're informed, right? So before I start, I want to make this statement, right? And I said it over here and saying, hey, we all have bosses, right? And they give direction, and we try to respond to that direction as best as we can. We try to be as transparent as best as we can. I can only share information, Wendy, when I'm told to share it, right? So, you know, things that I can share, and when I can be transparent, I try to do that. And still follow in line, right? Like Michael just said, he's been here 3 years. He'll be 3 years in August, and he wants to be here longer. It'll be 3 years for me in September. And hopefully, if Wendy will allow me, I'll stay longer too, right? So I just want to make sure, I want to set the table, because again, it does go to the heart of you're trusting us, right? Development services, this is bigger than development services. You have to know that, right? And if I could, I would say, Dan McGinn, get your ass up here and do this, because I think it's long-range planning. But be that as it may, it falls into my court, and we're always in the crosshairs. And so, anyway, I'll present. But I just want to kind of set the table for you, because I'm going to be coming back to this group with some much, you know, probably not as big as this, but some very heavy lifting, and I need to make sure that the trust is there so that you can ask me questions and you kind of reasonably trust what I'm saying. I'm not trying to run an end around or do those kind of things. So anyway, just wanted to get that set. So anyway, this is a briefing to this body, the upcoming UDC amendments and the subsequent multi-parcel amendments, or multi-parcel rezoning, I guess I should say. The Military Compatibility Area Overlay District, right? The purpose of this overlay district is to not only protect the Navy's mission, but to protect the environment of those living and working within specific areas around naval installations. The area covered under the MCAOD will be designated as place-specific guidelines for land use, noise, lighting, and vertical obstructions. It's a lot of information there, and you can always come back and ask questions. I just want to make sure, I got like 15 slides. I just want to stay at a high level. If you want to stop me as I go and ask questions, that's great, but this is kind of an important one, which talks about the history, right? Obviously, the Military Compatibility Overlay Area Districts was inspired by the ACUs, right? The Air Installation Compatibility Use Zones, ACUs. ACUs program began in 1973 as a means for the Department of Defense to investigate compatible land uses in proximity to military installations. The first ACU study in Corpus Christi was conducted in 1980 and addressed installations known as, of course, Naval Air Station Corpus Christi, Cabinets Field, and Waldron Field. An area-wide rezoning of Flower Bluff occurred in 1983 as part of an update to the Flower Bluff Area Development Plan, which incorporated goals of the ACUs. But as you know, they're not enforceable, right? So when zoning cases would come up, I assume we mentioned it, but it wasn't enforceable. That says you can't do this in this certain area in this location, right? Decades later, additional ACU studies were conducted and were based on upgrades to aircraft, advanced technology, and changing flight patterns of naval trainees. Additionally, and this is important, in 2013, a joint land use study, a JLOS, was conducted to further research compatible land uses and next steps in creating an environment that protected structures as well as the Navy's mission. One of these steps integrated the ACUs into what we then had was the UDC, which came about in 2011. So the ACUs is in the UDC, but it's sort of recommendations. It in and of itself is not necessarily enforceable. The Military Compatibility Area Overlay District, MCAOD, is defined by several areas. The Clear Zone, Accident Potential Zone 1, Accident Potential Zone 2, a Noise Subzone, a Vertical Obstruction Subzone, and a Light Subzone. All of that says this, I've just kind of condensed it. The Military Compatibility Overlay District is focused on three naval installations consisting of Naval Air Station Corpus Christi, Cabinets Field, and Waldron Field. The various shades of pink indicate accident potential zones that are part of the proposed MCAOD and directly inspired by, of course, the latest ACUs. The Military Compatibility Area Overlay District will have land use limitations identified in tabular form, as you see in this slide, where proposed language regarding residential uses within APZ. So you can see here, if you can read that, in the clear zone, no residential will be allowed. In APZ 1, no residential will be allowed. In APZ 2, there is allowance of residential buildings, but it's one dwelling unit per acre. The limitations of the MCAOD would supersede the underlying zoning district. So this overlay district would supersede whatever is there now. So for example, if vacant land is zoned RS6, single family 6 district would now be identified as RS6 APZ2, single family 6 district with accident potential zone 2, which means that they won't be allowed to build the RS6, but they could build the 1 unit per acre in APZ2, but not in 1, and of course not in the clear zone. This slide shows an additional excerpt from the proposed language regarding commercial uses, specifically trade uses within the APZs. Commercial uses are both allowed in APZ 1, in APZ 1, as you see there, and APZ 2. Of course, nothing is allowed in the clear zone. However, there would be a maximum floor area ratio allowed for the size of the building within those accident potential zones. For example, a 2-acre parcel that's about 87,000 acres would allow a shopping center no greater than 19,000 square feet. 87,000 square feet will allow a shopping center building no greater than 19,000 square feet, which is about 22% of the acreage size. Again, the limitations of the MCAOD would supersede the underlying zoning district, and the floor area ratio would really control the size of the building. The whole idea is to control density and people in certain areas in those APC zones. The light subzone of the Military Compatibility Area Overlay District focuses on the height and shielding of fixtures. The noise subzone of the Military Compatibility Area Overlay District focuses on noise levels within new residential dwellings. For example, a new residential building shall be constructed with sound insulation or other means to achieve a decibel level of 45 decibels or less inside the building. Vertical obstruction subzones of the Military Compatibility Area Overlay District focuses on, of course, height of structures within air traffic patterns. Potential obstructions include, of course, natural terrain, man-made features such as buildings, towers, poles, wind turbines, cell towers, and other vertical obstructions into airspace navigation. Additional vertical obstruction subzones in Military Compatibility Area Overlay Districts has various scale measurements for surfaces. The purpose is the ability to assess the impact of structural height within a three-dimensional space. Again, just to protect the flight area. Vertical obstruction subzone of the Military Compatibility Area Overlay District also incorporates a measurement tool entitled Imaginary Surfaces. Imaginary surfaces placement is the placement of height and structures and or landscaping in various layers. Additionally, layers serve to prohibit release of possible dust, smoke, etc., that would impair visibility of the pilots. Plat notice and supplemental information. Plat notice, a notice will be placed, should this move forward, notice will be placed on all final plat properties located within accident potential zones 1 and 2 that the property either partially or wholly lies within an accident potential zone and is subject to noise and/or aircraft accident potentials which may be objectionable. Supplemental information wherever an application, whenever an application for a change in zoning within the military compatibility area overlay district is filed, the Director of Development Services should make formal request to the Navy, the United States Navy, at least 30 days prior to the Planning Commission hearing to receive relevant stats, operational activity information, technical data, or other studies bearing on this request, on the rezoning request. And just, this is what is scheduled to occur on May 15th, in a few weeks from now, how those meetings will go. We tried to communicate that in the letter that was sent to this body. I'm not sure if it all got through, but this is kind of how that meeting will be held, right? And ultimately, your recommendation will go to council that day. And you may ask, well, why the joint meeting? The UDC has a provision that whenever a rezoning will affect 10 or more parcels, we can have this meeting, this joint meeting, because it kind of condenses that whole process, right? If you ask, well, what's the rush on this, right? Well, you're absolutely right if you say, well, we should have done this back in 2013. Yes, we probably should have, or back in probably 1983. I think San Antonio did their overlay zones. They started in the 1980s, right? So we're a few decades late, but better late than never, right? So anyway, staff will be making a recommendation of approval on that date. And I just wanted to present this to you guys and see if there are questions that I can ask. I or my team can answer to address any of your concerns.
I'll jump in. A couple of questions from my end. Again, I think one of the things in the presentation that's confusing is, did any of the boundary lines change as part of this overlay district?
Boundary lines with respect to the
Like
ACUs or?
Yeah, like the AQ zones or.
The ACUs layout is exactly what was presented in 2020 and I guess approved by the Navy in 2021. So that's the same, and we just
So
overlaid that
the overlay
on
district is consistent with.
what was presented in a few years back, yes.
Okay.
That's true.
And then, I know this is like a new amendment, but it's hard for me to follow like what the changes are. You're saying what's recommended, but we don't really know, there's no red line version of this in terms of, hey, we could have this residential in this AP1 zone or AP2 zone. You're just kind of showing what you're proposing, but we don't necessarily know what's being changed.
Excellent point. We do have an ordinance. Yeah, please.
So, yeah, the ordinance, I would say it's close to being finalized, so I anticipate the ordinance to be probably finalized in the next couple of days, and then probably releasable at that point once it's finalized.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, did this go to Development Services Advisory Group for any input, or is this, again, another one of these coming up from upper management? Let's try and cram it through, no public comment, no vetting. I mean, kind of similar mode of operation from the previous agenda item?
Mr. Chair, in this city, for some reason, Development Service is always in the crosshairs, and they have to be burdened with carrying bad news. Never do we come with great news, like, Andrew's getting a promotion or something like that. It's always something, absolutely, you're right. No, it didn't go through a vetting process. Why, I cannot answer. It's a legitimate question, but I have no response for that. We are where we are right now, and we'll be forwarding you the ordinance that is redlined so you can see what was original and what is changing, right? And all of you have the ability to comment and, and you'll be asked for a recommendation on the 17th, and it goes from there.
Well, I think you probably know where I stand on it, but again, I'm just all about transparency, understanding what the impact is from landowners, what these changes are. Again, I'm in full support of doing what we can to support our military, but I also think there's processes at work that continue to get bypassed, and hopefully we'll respect those. And again, I think it's just absurd that we're getting something presented like this that's already been written, no input, and ready to go to council. So, Commissioner Miller?
Well, I want to start off by saying that nobody has talked more about APZs than me in the past 5 years. And I appreciate the intent of this proposed overlay district. But I want to talk about, the two main intents of the AQs and what was developed in the 80s is first and foremost health and safety. Secondly, protection of one of our greatest assets here in the coastal bend, which is NASCC and CCAD. Now, that being said, I see this as extremely problematic, but for the simple fact that if this was coming to us with the intent of freezing zoning, like let's say the overlay district, everything within that overlay district cannot be upzoned, then that's okay. I would be in support of something like that. What hurts, what I have heartburn about with this particular thing is because it's essentially downzoning some properties. And there's people that have paid for properties in this town that are RS6 or CN1 or whatever that are not within the compatibility of this overlay. However, that was the base zoning from the 60s or whenever that zoning was adopted. And they bought it under those pretenses. And it would be like if I lived in a neighborhood, and I've said this before, and I drove a Ferrari, and the rest of the neighbors decided that Ferrari was dangerous for everybody around there and took my keys away and gave me a Prius. I wouldn't take that laying down. So I could see a lot of potential litigation towards the city should this move forward in its current form. And so that, to me, brings cause for pause. But again, I appreciate 100% the intent of this overlay. I just think that it needs some major edits because there's a lot of unintended consequences that need to be vetted. Like if I live in a house in an RS6 within an APZ2, which exists many, many places throughout the city, and I decided I wanted to remodel, or let's say a storm blew in and it destroyed 50% of my house, and I had to go in and remodel or rebuild 50% of my house and go get a building permit to do that. Technically, I wouldn't be able to do that. So those are all things that are extremely problematic that need to be vetted before we move forward with something like this. So,
Understood.
that being said, Ben, I'm 100% always on your side and on the side of the Navy. I just got to look at this thing from a 40,000-foot view and make the right decision. So I think it warrants further discussion.
Commissioner York?
All right, thank you. Okay, first, just a couple of clarifying things. Just to be clear, if this goes through, this would be essentially a forced rezoning. Is that accurate?
That would be accurate, yes.
Okay, so,
I would say city initiated. It's,
Okay.
I know it's semantics, but it's
Sure.
not
Yes.
forced.
has the same ring to it.
It's city initiated.
And again, just to be clear, it would essentially take properties that are currently developable and make them not developable or less developable.
Well, it's, many would say, as this gentleman was saying, you're encroaching on the property's highest and best use. But with the overlay, right, and with its proximity to the naval installation, yes, you can still develop the property, you probably just can't do its highest and best use of what the zoning once was.
Understood. I just want to be clear with that because regardless of what this was, even if it was an ordinance, we want to give everybody in the city $100, I would still say we need to go get public input, because that's what you're supposed to do. But this is insane to have an ordinance like this that's going to potentially forcefully limit property owners' rights, and it gets no input. It's insane. My next, and I do have some technical questions afterwards, because apparently we're going to be going to a meeting in 2 weeks, and so at least I'll try and get some of these answered now. But my biggest question, it sounds like we're going to what you called a joint meeting. So council's asking us to convene planning commission at council.
Yes.
Correct.
Does planning commission at that joint meeting have the ability to table that item so that it can't be voted on by council?
That can be your recommendation.
I'm just asking what our options
I
are.
believe if,
Yes, I mean, that would be a potential recommendation, would be to recommend to approve, recommend to table, recommend to deny, or recommend to amend.
And so, and I want to make a point, and I think you brought it up, and forgive me if it wasn't you, but you said, hey, why didn't you guys just freeze zoning? So when I went to, because when we started this conversation, I go, okay, well, Peter, if we go and start, saying, oh, yeah, we now want to look at how, land is developing around the installations, we could put a moratorium and say that, zoning is frozen, but apparently we can't do that, right? So,
Why?
well, yeah, this is by attorney.
The state law limits, really limits cities' ability to do zoning moratoriums.
Because that's what we're going to use to be able to start the conversation that says, hey, public, this is what we're going to do. We realize that this is real heavy lifting, right, which is bigger than development services. So there has to be this outside engagement that looks at it and says, hey, well, if you do this, the city is in line for, legal action, potential legal action, right? And we understand that. We're moving forward, right? And so on May 17th, this body does have the ability to say, well, we think, like you just said, and the things you're saying, Michael York, are so reasonable, who could argue with it, right? And you can say, well, we need to vet this some more, and we want to table it. That could be your recommendation, right? So,
And if, so, say our commission at that special meeting, we vote to table it, can we, as a condition of that, say that it needs to go be properly, vetted, get public input, and the whole 9 yards?
absolutely.
Okay.
But remember, your recommendation is just a recommendation.
Well, that's what I'm asking. So, but that's why I ask about this procedurally, because when we table something, it doesn't get to go to council. So if we table it at that meeting, that means it's not on their agenda after that. Is that correct, or?
No, that's incorrect. The agenda, the item will be on the council agenda. It's a joint public hearing.
So it was a very
They
strategic
can
move on their
bypass.
part. Okay. So is there a reason we're even there?
Just, all I can say is, don't look at development services when you're thinking about this, right?
I'm not looking at you guys at all.
We're just carrying it forward, right?
I know you
Jeez.
aren't the ones pushing this.
I think I think that council's is trying to do the right thing, and I think that there's other ways that the right thing could be accomplished that wouldn't affect 1,000 property owners. So I think that there's a better way to do this, but again, it warrants further discussion.
So it's not even about that. It's just doing the right thing. You
But
got to get public input no matter what, and I don't see how anybody, especially an elected official who's there literally elected by the people, is going to say, screw you, you don't get to have any say in this.
So
I just
Commissioner
don't see how
York,
that can
I
happen.
would recommend, and I would recommend to all of you, to reach out to those who appointed you and make your feelings known, right? Well, before you get to that meeting in a couple of weeks. I think that's a positive approach to kind of set the table of what that day will be like, for me as well.
Okay, one last question on the procedural stuff, and then I got some technical questions about your stuff. If we vote to table it, does that require then that they have a supermajority, or does it do nothing?
No, that wouldn't trigger
If we vote to not recommend approval?
I don't believe so.
Sorry, say that again?
I'd have to review it, but I don't believe so.
Okay.
But if we deny the proposed text amendment, they would have to have a supermajority to approve it.
I'd have to review that.
Can you find out? 'Cause
Come on,
we
man.
definitely want to know that. If we vote to table and it doesn't matter, but if we vote to deny and they have to have supermajority, that makes a difference on what we might decide to do at that meeting. Okay, the technical questions. First is, all those densities you listed off, percentages that they can, their max percentage or something, they're like, where did those all come from? Because that was pretty quick to slap together. I'm assuming it was taken from somewhere
Those came
else.
straight from the ACUS guidelines established by the Navy. So
Okay.
it is a verbatim placement from one section of the code to another. So it exists today in Article 6, the guidelines of what should be allowed in APZ 1, the clear zones in APZ 2. So that was a direct copy and paste for those densities as recommended by the Navy.
Okay, and the other one, you mentioned about CCIA not being a part of it, and why? You kind of started to explain that, but, and one, the Navy does use it, and two, why?
It's a long story. The short version is that whenever you involve a municipal airport, it would have to go through the Airport Zoning Commission for their review. And that is based on
And that would slow
statute.
things down, I guess?
That would
So there was
technically
strategically
slow
not
things
put on
down.
this?
I'm sure there was intent behind that decision for the timing, but that would theoretically slow things down. And on top of that, CCIA has what's called a safety subzone. It doesn't have a true ACUS. So when the J-list was done in 2013, how Corpus International is different from any other military installation is those are just straight flights in and flights out. The what we used to call the fan pattern, now our closed loops does not exist for a municipal airport, very much so like many commercial airports across the country. And so what the person, the company consultant doing the study simply took the measurements of a clear zone is 5,000 feet off the end of the runway, APZ 1 is an additional square footage, and APZ 2 is an additional, and simply attach those measurements to the ends of the runway for CCIA. So while on a map it looks like an ACUS, it's not a true ACUS. It's really what's called a safety subzone, and that's why it's called MACOD, Military Area Compatibility, which is what it's called in the Joint Land Use Study. So we're doing our best to use the same terms directly from the Joint Land Use, because at the very end of that entire study, it says, here you go, city, these are the things that you need to implement to make this study actually work, and not just a plan that's going to go straight to the shelf, which the timing of that plan happened when, back when I was with the planning department, and the planning department was closed a few months after the J-list was completed. So it pretty much sat on a shelf. No other department really took it up to keep moving forward. And when the planning department was reassembled a handful of years later, it was pretty much very low on the list. That's why you're seeing so many area development plans come through first. Those are the priorities. Interesting enough, the term ACUS, for instance, in the Flower Bluff Area Development Plan, where in the original one from the 80s, it was an entire chapter, is now all of a sentence in the new ADP. So my fear is, at least just my opinion, in that not enough attention is being paid in the area development plans, especially when it comes to future land use, where we use that tool in every single rezoning. Even that's not being used right now. So this is one of those things to get us back on track using this overlay to correct some of those sins of the past. That's not a complete excuse of why the timing behind it, but it's a reason to explain the rationale of why it does, to an extent, need to occur.
Understood. And, generally, I think the intent behind these are good, but this needs to be a way, way, way longer process with lots of input so we can massage it. It doesn't need to be right out of the book, maybe. There may be a happy middle ground. One last thing, and I'll let other people ask questions, but just, apparently we got letters, which, by the way, I didn't get one. One of the other commissioners was nice enough to show me this letter that we got apparently last week from the mayor and city manager, but can you tell me who actually initiated this? Was this coming from council? Is this coming from the city manager? Or is it-
Initiated that letter you got?
Not the letter, but this process. Who's the person that said, we want to push this overlay and get it done ASAP? Did that come from council or is that from city manager?
I think it was a collective effort of both, right? Council reached out to Peter because of the same similar development on the location where the school was, right? And everyone's hair's on fire again because we didn't do anything then when the school moved and said, okay, well, maybe we need to do something here because someone else can come here and develop. Well, someone else came there and developed, and now the sky is falling. So I guess citizens contacted the council members contact Peter, and now we're here.
It's a culmination of every plot that you have seen that's in an APZ, and you as a body have no power to apply any of the AQ standards to a plot. It's not to say that the board's a rubber stamp, but you're fulfilling the statutory requirement. It's an administrative capacity to say yes or no to a plot. So there's been 6 plots that have roughly come through in and around Waldron, a large school that shall remain nameless that was in an ACUS and now with the new maps is in the middle of an ACUS again. The building itself today is an APZ2. So it just was transplanted from one problem to another. But that is, and then now an apartment complex has been in the news that's high density that would be located in APZ2. So it's several factors over time have been coming up consistently for the need of us to draft some language to limit land uses. That's, I do agree with you, Commissioner York. There should be a little bit more time for vetting on to what threshold those limitations should be, as most other municipalities have done that have encountered this issue. But those are the marching orders we're given, and we're carrying them out to the best of our ability.
I agree, more time would be nice. This could have been started a year ago or 2 years ago, and we could have been vetting it for a year. I don't know if this is an election year or what's going on, but
Or
I
5 years
assume we
ago
still
when I
have
was jumping
time.
up and down about it.
Yeah, we still have time to vet it.
Commissioner Schroeder?
So, okay, so all this stuff comes, I mean, it's because there's pressure. You know, all these other communities where the Navy has left those communities and people have become against them is because pressure. We're going to be in the same boat, and we love to say that we love the Navy. We all do. But as soon as somebody can't make as much money as they can on their property, they don't anymore because it's perceived to be that it's the Navy's fault. It's not the Navy's fault because this stuff doesn't get dealt with. What I hope to see in the presentation are a couple of things. I thought Mr. Pollock's presentation back in 2020 did a very good job, and I'd like to see those slides again of the difference in area between the prior ACUs and the new ACUs. And from what I recall in that, there's not a significant amount of difference. Now, Mr. Deems is cringing, so maybe there's some big differences.
There's a small acreage, I would say there's the closing of the loops, what I like to call the old palm tree design of Cabinets, for example. Those loops are now completed. So there was a pretty significant growth. I think the last number was about 150 acres just for Cabinets alone to close those loops.
Okay, so
the method, yes, the pattern stayed consistent, but what is now under a layer was an imaginary layer is now under an actual designated layer.
Okay, so the APZ2 now makes a complete loop because I didn't understand that it did.
Hold on, let's see.
Go back to one of those slides. That's a perfect slide. So as you can see, it's hard to see, but if you can imagine Cabinets in your upper left-hand corner,
Yep.
those were originally fanned, meaning they cut off, those loops did not complete the pattern.
Right.
Now that entire area is an APZ2.
Okay.
Some of the discussions we had going over the study, are the ones too small and are the twos too big? Should there be a 3, APZ3 inevitably? I think that could come up in a future JLIS, which the idea behind this is it also puts us in line to ask for federal funding to keep the process going, to do a 2023 JLIS and to look at it again.
Okay, and you mentioned a little bit earlier something that I don't think I recall hearing, is that the JLIS and these zones as they're currently mapped aren't the same.
Correct. So the JLIS initiated a process. Every 10 years, the Navy will study various fields. The 2020 version of the ACUs, almost imagine parallel trains, JLIS and ACUs, updated Waldron and Cabanus alone. See, the NAS proper already has the largest APZ areas in the city. So there's really not too much more they could grow with some of those flight patterns. But with Cabanus and Waldron, that's where those loops have now closed, and the difference between what is 2020 patterns versus 2013 or 2009 patterns from the original ACUs.
Okay, so can we have maps that,
Sure.
that show the difference between, and Director Raymond, you said these went in the UDC in 2011?
In 2013,
2013, okay. What was 2011? You mentioned.
the UDC
Was adopted.
was adopted in
Adopted, okay.
2011.
So these have been, now I understand that in 2013, these are not, but at least there, in 2013, people could see reference to these areas publicly. In other words, it was public information that these were guidelines or recommendations in the UDC, although not a requirement.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. And then, so those maps now have been, what's currently being proposed is the 2020 version of the JLIS with the loops closed. And that's what's currently proposed in this overlay?
Correct. These maps are based on the 2020 versions of Cabanus and Waldron and the 2009 version of NASCC, since there was no update in 2020
Right.
to it. So it's
And
a hybrid of two studies.
But are these more extensive areas than were presented to us in the 2020 JLIS
So there was a
presentation?
2018 draft that originally was floating in a first initial presentation back then in December of 18. We saw some preliminary maps, and that was the 2020 presentation. There has been no further changes since the 2020 presentation. Those are the final maps that have been approved by the Navy. The GIS layers you see are the finals, with no updates since that 2020 meeting.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, this is one of these deals where all of us are going to get hammered regardless of what we say one way or the other, and it's simply because, as a city, we kicked the can.
That's
for,
true.
For quite a long time. So we can't go pointing to all of these other communities on other coasts saying you abandoned the Navy because of growth, because Texas is now there, where Texas is growing. And our city is going through these growing pains. And so if we don't start approaching this stuff better than we have in the past, we're just the same as anybody else.
You're correct.
That's a we.
Thank you.
Our problem is always that we want to point at everybody else. But it's we. And that's, if I volunteer to sit on this planning commission, you're putting yourself in the crosshairs. But we have to do that if we're going to grow well and be a good, build a better city. And constantly pointing at everybody else as being the problem isn't going to solve it.
I got a couple questions for Buck. Who's responsible for establishing the meeting time? Who has the authority to set the meeting time for the Planning Commission and authorize a joint meeting with Council and Planning Commission?
I would say that the mayor, 4 members of council, or the city manager.
So the chairman of the Planning Commission doesn't have any authority to say that that's not a good meeting time for us because we've got a regular scheduled meeting at 5:30 on Wednesday.
Right.
Okay. And what happens if there's not how many does it take for a quorum of the Planning Commission?
5.
And what happens if we don't have 5 at that city council meeting? Is the council able to act on this matter?
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't hold, I don't believe they'd be able to hold I'd have to research it because I don't know how the quorum works in a joint.
I think it said on the notice, if quorum wasn't established, it'd be a denial recommendation.
Okay.
That's right.
I have to look at that.
And as a denial, it would require a supermajority for them to pass it, correct?
He's got to research that.
It's a loaded question because it's a text amendment and a rezoning, so,
Right.
and I don't want to step on Buck's toes, so that's, it's two issues in one, and I think that's why the extra research is needed. So there's one aspect as I'm amending the UDC, and the other is I'm amending the actual zoning map.
Okay. The other question is, normally with director's reports, we don't do public hearing. Do I have the option to get public comment for people that are here tonight on this item?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have that option.
Okay. Are there any other questions for staff at this time? No, I'm surprised you're not wearing a question mark on your shirt. Okay. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up public comment for item number 10. If you would, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Herman, and I'm the Executive Officer of the Coastal Bend Home Builders Association. Our address is 5325 Yorktown Boulevard. I don't know about y'all, but my spidey sense is tingling here. When we first got notice of this on Monday, it struck us as very surprising that we hadn't heard anything about this because we are in constant contact. Usually Development Services is awesome about keeping us in the loop on things. And when something like this is about to be shoved through really quickly, and apparently they're usurping the authority that this commission has here as well, something ain't right. So I'm not sure what is going on here, and I'm not sure why it's being forced through, and I'm not sure why they can't wait till you guys have the opportunity to get this figured out and get your questions answered and see maps. But I feel like if they're trying to shove it through this quickly, there's cause for concern. And, it could be that we'll all love this, but I don't know. The landowners haven't been notified. They're not here today. And I think that there's cause for concern with this until we can get our questions answered. I really hope that we can slow this train down.
Thank you.
Moses Mastagasi, 8017 Barley Dock, just a normal human being. I'll just use that as my title. So ultimately, I kind of agree. It's more of confusion, trying to understand it. We have property that was in the previous ACUs and the new ACUs, what might change in the 24 ACUs. I mean, just kind of understanding how the ACUs comes about. We're obviously wanting to be very cautious for safety, density, not necessarily for the residential side, but for the commercial side, understanding what Al said, for every 2 acres, you get 19,000 square feet of commercial property or building, whether that's storage, whether that's actual residential, if that's certain times. It just affects land. I mean, obviously it affects land prices, affects what type of buildings can be on that area. Saratoga is a very large corridor, just like SBID. It backs up all the way from what is 286 all the way to Everhart between 4 and 7 o'clock. So it's already pretty highly trafficked, but just trying to understand it. And, there was one point made here that if a school of that size is already being allowed to be in the ACUs or in the previous ACUs or in the new ACUs, trying to do an overlay seems kind of too late. That's going to have the most density in that area. And then to say, okay, you can't do a 10,000 square foot retail building on 1 acre doesn't really seem, fair or make sense compared to having a 100,000 square foot school that's jam-packed with all different ages and groups, where a shopping center might have 7 to 25 people at a time in it. So really just the communication, trying to understand it, and maybe I should get a plat in by tomorrow or something like that to kind of not qualify for it. I don't know. But just trying to understand it. And again, we've been great partners with the Navy. We've built things around the ACUs, and still want to be great partners with them, obviously, as everybody does. But just understanding it, I didn't understand anything y'all said today, and I think I'm kind of smart when it comes to this stuff. So, we'll be looking at what you guys can do or can't do, and also reaching out to council members just to understand the process. I mean, you're really just stripping people of their land rights, and that's a dangerous, setting, whether it's for this or tomorrow other things that come about. So, thank you.
Hello again, Commissioners. Mr. Chairman, I'm Bart Brazelton, President of the Home Builders Association, Coastal Bend Home Builders Association. I want to address the one issue of this that struck me immediately. We had a little war about something like this. It was called the Revolution. This is the taking of land, the direct taking of land by ordinance, by fiat. There has been, I hope this is wrong. I hope that there is certainly a plan that we have not yet been made aware of. Love the Navy. We're with the Blue Angels. The kids love the Blue Angels. But it is incredibly hard as the representative of the Home Builders Association of builders and developers to sit up here and ignore the fact that this is the taking of land. The rock, the basis of our republic. I hope that there is another way to do this. I hope there's another way to look at this, but I can't see it yet. I also, just as has been echoed here, I just want to echo again, I don't understand the rush in the process. When something is rushed now the second time something is rushed, why is there a process at all? Why do we even have the rest of the process? Why do we even have zoning if we can just come along one day and say, your zoning doesn't count anymore? I pray for the wisdom of this commission. You have a task in front of you. I really do. I pray for the wisdom that you have. Know that you hold the fate of many landowners in your capable hands. This is a very serious issue, and as an association, we're going to continue to push for landowners' rights, future homeowners' rights. And I'm not a realtor, as my friend the commissioner well knows. But I wonder what's the value of one of those houses that's under one of these new zones. I know good and well, they're certainly grandfathered in, but how much does somebody really want to buy a house that an airplane might fall on? Just hope that is considered as well. Thank you.
All right, good evening. Ben Polak, Community Planning Liaison Officer for the Naval Air Station, ex officio member of the Planning Commission as well. I know most of the time when you see me, you're kind of like, ooh, cringe, Navy's got something bad to say. But really, this is just more of a statement in general. I served 23 years in the Navy, retired, and now 6 years here with the base. And my job really is about us being able to do our mission and at the same time being good neighbors with the community and the health, safety, and well-being of everyone. Once again, it was talked about here, we aren't a governing body, all right? All we do is recommend. I would like to probably consider us more of a consulting role, that we are here to try to encourage compatible developments around the airfield. And any help that we can do from my side, the Navy side, we're here to do that. And I will say, end on this, the 23 years that I did and the 6 years that I've already been here, this community has probably been the biggest supporter of the military that I've ever seen, no matter where I've been, East Coast, West Coast, overseas. okay? So I know that you guys have our best interest, and like I said, whatever we can do to help as far as compatible development around our airfields, we're here at any time. Thanks.
Anyone else? Anyone else wishing to make public comment on item number 10? All right, there being none, we'll close the public comment period, and I guess see if there's any future agenda items that want to be added.
I have a question.
Schrader?
Well, there was a point that was raised in the public comment that I think is pretty clear to make sure that that distinction is made, in that there's really two things here. There's the issue of putting into law something, whether this is an ordinance, whatever this is that may or may not get adopted, that could be very fraught, will be very fraught with, how it affects people that are owners and potential future owners and everything. The other part of this is just basic information and transparency. And it's, just take, for example, homes that are already built in these areas. The Navy's been, planes have been flying over those areas. They've been doing the same stuff already for years. What's changed about this is how they recommend, the performance capabilities of one aircraft over maybe an older aircraft that was used before, and slight differences in what those tendencies may or may not be. But it's all odds. It's all actuarial study. It's not realistically more risk over one set of maps than another. It's about conveying that information to people. If you're a homeowner, understanding that you may be in one of those zones if you want to buy a property. The ordinance is a totally separate thing, in my view, and whether it should or shouldn't be, and how significant that should be. But the market is going to decide whether that home that's directly under that particular outline is worth less or more than one that's just outside it. I think what's really interesting about this, I go back to the case that we had for the apartment development in Flower Bluff, is that because this is a real challenging part. If you're, that issue was that development was just outside the boundary, and Mr. Pollock's recommendation was that the Navy didn't look at that as an ideal situation, and from a practical standpoint, he's perfectly right. 50 feet on one side of the line or the other, and you're dealing with the risk or the possibility of an aircraft crashing is one weighing the risk. So we have to keep perspective on all of that in deciding this. But the important thing is that the information is out there for people who want to, and I think that's more important, frankly, than what gets adopted as actual, in real terms. I understand it's extremely important of what gets adopted to affect somebody's property. That's hugely important. But making sure that people have information available to them and them making their own decision based on their own judgment, I think is, and framing it in that way as to whether we adopt an ordinance or not is the more important part, because if people can't make decisions for themselves based on information that's out there, then and have some personal responsibility in that risk, then this idea of creating these extremely rigid ordinances is as one person put it, taking the ability to use your property. So,
Commissioner York?
Yeah, just question on when you guys typically do public input for like an area development plan, what length of time is that?
We don't really do area development plans. That's the planning department.
But in my experience, when I used to work on them, a number of years ago, it's usually somewhere around a 18 to 24-month process in total, from day of initiation to date of potential adoption.
And this was done in the last 2 weeks, right?
It was less than 30 days.
And an ADP doesn't actually change anything. It's just a planning.
Correct. An ADP is a portion of the comprehensive plan. Of course, I get to plug my zoning 101. So when we talked about training, the comprehensive plan is the brain. It is supposed to be our guiding documents, our ways of when we make decisions about rezonings and plats and all those duties that are assigned to you. That is when you keep in the back of your mind, what does the ADP say? What does the comprehensive plan as a whole say? Plan CC, future land use map, all of those good things.
Thanks.
Commissioner Sorgini?
Okay, I have a couple of questions. One is based on this proposed amendment, the current projects that are being constructed kind of get away with it? Like
There are vesting statutes in state law that once a plat is submitted or once a building permit application is submitted, that shows intent for construction. So there are some protections for vesting those projects.
Correct, but we're talking about safety, all that. School is being built, getting ready to open up in August.
They never remodeled the old Carroll. They don't have to remodel this one.
I just wanted to know out of curiosity. I mean, they just get away with it because they just have it finished, or?
Essentially, because the process was begun and construction began prior to the new maps being finalized.
But at the same time, the project that is being proposed for construction now, they could stop it or downzoning it since they haven't started yet. Like if they're going through the process of any kind of development that they have, apartment, shopping center, whatever the case is.
The apartments project, the difference with that one is they're still pending approvals from TxDOT that are still in play. So the plat has not been yet recorded.
Recorded, okay. So next question is, on May 17th, there's going to be a joint planning commission and
Yes, sir.
council meeting. It's going to be a lovely night. But are the public open? Are the
Oh, yes.
public invited?
Public hearing.
Okay, so the reason I'm bringing this up is, the reason we have a few public attendees here is because they either have a bunch of properties here or they got the notification from Development Services. How can the entire public get notification that at least they hear what's going on? I mean, I think that's something that is a pretty fair request.
Of
in my
course, we
opinion.
follow the notice procedures of publishing it in the newspaper. More than likely, it'll be on our website, and
Could I request to have that done by then? So we can at least, I mean, obviously, we're talking about this body is a recommended body to the council. Regardless of what we recommend, the council has the final say. But I would like to know if we can make every attempt possible to have public in attendance. I mean, to at least
of
hear.
course, public meeting, completely open to the public.
But I'm saying that,
and
quite honestly, probably the landowner that owns a property, respectfully, to a property down Saratoga, they may not even know this issue is going on. So I want to bring that conversation up and make sure that they get at least their fair shot. And I think we live in America. This is a
Sure.
freedom of
So
speech. and
Council,
we have democracy here.
as part of the vote that they did a few weeks back, they elected the method of notice. So what the UDC states is that if you zone more than 10 parcels to initiate a joint meeting, the council by 2/3 vote can choose the means of notification, which means they can pick either to mail, to put up signs, to publish in the paper, all three, or maybe only one. They selected to only publish in the newspaper the notification, and they're within their rights to do that.
So pretty much council can change according to what they feel necessary, is what I'm
They
saying?
can, the state law gives them that power so
State law
long
does.
as they take a vote by 2/3 majority
So-
approving.
As a member of this body or as a planning commission, could we do something that we can notify the public better? Because I do want to know that. I mean, are we able to post it in social media or any
Sure,
advertising?
absolutely. We'll probably evaluate, and my attorney, who I love, just said, hey, we can look at other means of making sure that there is notice, right? But what he was saying is that council voted that, hey, we're only going to publish in the paper because we're impacting so many properties. That would be thousands of dollars, really, that we said, okay, what's the most expedient method? And because, as many of you said, we're trying to condense this and make sure that this train, as someone said, keeps moving, the council elected to just publish in the paper. But as Andrew said, we'll have it on our website. We'll look at other means to get information out to the public, maybe flyers at our office, and you can also put it on links of your Facebook or whatever so that people are informed, because you're right.
And the reason
We
I'm-
only reach such a limited amount of people, so people don't know that something's happening that really will impact their
And the reason
life.
I'm saying that, sorry, but it's like if y'all putting it on your website, as a general consumer, not knowing what's going on, they may not even visit the website. How often a general consumer go to the City of Corpus Christi website for something? And I want to know to what extent, if we are allowed, I wanted to clarify that first, we can let the public know that they can be in attendance, because is the meeting after planning commission that we are having with the council that night?
It is during.
During
So
the-
it's where
okay.
council will begin their meeting, will recess
Yes.
for the planning commission to convene, to review, ask questions, go through your normal process, just as tonight, render a recommendation. The planning commission will then adjourn and pass that recommendation. I mean, you all will literally be sitting right here, so it's almost turning around and handing your recommendation to the council member, that your corresponding council member behind you, and they will then go through their deliberation and potential vote.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And- All right. Yes, Commissioner Rilla.
I just think that there's a better way to do this. And, if there is a legitimate reason on a case-by-case basis, if there's a legitimate, immediate risk to public health and safety, then there's other tools that the city could use. Like, they could say, well, we're not going to give you water, or we're not going to give you wastewater, or we're not going to hook up this or hook up that. And just like, I can understand the intent of this. It just affects so many people and so many different properties that it's extremely problematic, because, and the opposite of that would be is, what happens if somebody puts a antenna or a wind turbine or something, on the departure of one of the runways or something like that? Well, obviously, that's a immediate risk to public safety and to, aircraft travel. So I think there's better ways to do this. And I wish somebody would have called me back. But Ben, would you mind strapping some of those banners on the back of the fixed wing trainers, and so we can notify everybody within the flight pattern? Oh, man, come on. It'd be fun. Skywriting, that's awesome.
Commissioner Zorgini?
I also want to make this comment. What's also heartbreaking is that, to Mr. Brazelton comment about being the real estate, public doesn't sometimes respectfully don't know the difference of the zoning and how much that impact the investment or the type of properties that they have going to this very blindsided. And to me, it's very heartbreaking. Honestly, as a real estate professional, something that I do every day, I can't imagine how much we're talking about, maybe billions of dollars, maybe impact into the properties that we're talking about. And in all fairness, at the very least, the full transparency has to be in place, that as an individual owner know what this does and make a decision. So I really hope that the best decision that can happen that helps the public safety, yes, I'm always for that. We always support it. We talked about this several months ago about the development that is in Flower Bluff. And I remember specifically, we were told that regardless of what the motion we make, we have 30 days it would be a 30 days process, right? That it would automatically be
Correct, by
approved, right?
statute.
And tonight, we're hearing a complete opposite. So it just amazed me how in such a very quick time, because I was shocked last week when I got notified about this, that we have to make such a quick decision. So pray for the best.
I got one question. This process that we're now in, where council's convened a special meeting and lessened the notification standards and all that, has that ever happened before?
Only once with the adoption of the UDC, because we essentially rezoned every property in the city of Corpus Christi. So it'd be impossible to mail out, or I should say highly improbable to mail out 100,000 notices and put a sign on every property. So that makes logical sense, obviously. You're changing zoning district names. As we bring the UDC text amendments forward, some of those district names are going to consolidate, some are going to change name. A very similar process will have to happen because more than 10 parcels will be zoned. But that is the reason the tool exists. But very much like I tell customers, a hammer can be used to build a house and a hammer can be used to commit a crime. It's just a tool. It's not the tool's fault. It's the means in which the tool is used. So I don't have hard feelings against the tool existing. It's, again, the method.
Sure. What was I'm assuming there was public input for the UDC?
Yeah, what was the process on that for people that weren't
UDC
involved with it?
was a hair under 4 years. So it was my first project when I started working for the city of Corpus Christi. So it was a very long,
one done in 2 weeks?
4-year process. A little more than 2 weeks, a little bit.
All right.
4 years, and that was just city staff working on that, or?
It was there were several focus groups. There were 8 focus groups that existed for sections of the UDC, almost magnified DSTAG by 10. And ultimately, what was the predecessor to DSTAG was called the administrative group, and you had a representative from each one of the smaller focus groups. One handled landscaping, one was about signs, one was about parks, one was about infrastructure, and one about transportation. So each one of those heads assembled to create the administrative group, and they had the final check and balance going line for line through. Back then, it was only 400 pages. It's grown a little bit since then, but that was the recommendation that ultimately went to City Council for approval. But that was a very long 4-year process.
4-year process, probably 50 or 100 people involved in that, and the different age groups.
Easily.
And just to confirm, this process, no involvement, 2 weeks, maybe a month?
About 30 days, I would say, since the start.
Thank you. Okay, if there, yes, sir.
On that day, who's going to set up here? Us or them?
It's not me, and I'm grateful for that. But no, the council would take their normal seats, and back in the UDC days, we set up tables for the planning commission.
Yeah, when is that meeting, Andrew?
May the 17th.
Okay, at our regular scheduled time?
At the regular council meeting time, 11:30.
That's a Tuesday, right?
Yes, I believe so. It's the first agenda.
Didn't we table something?
I haven't gotten any notice.
This is a Tuesday meeting.
Yeah.
So we got to come back Wednesday, or? Yeah.
Yes.
You would come back, council meetings begin on Tuesdays at 11:30 in the morning. Which, unfortunately, it's not with a 2-drink minimum at this point. They get a small stipend. I believe it's $4,000 a year.
All right, well, I think we've had enough fun for one night. I'm going to see if anybody wants to adjourn this commission meeting.
Let's go.
All right, meeting adjourned.